we're hardwired to be tempted to lie to ourselves. And the lies are very interesting. You know, I've studied that for a very long time, trying to figure out exactly that. Now, so imagine that your belief systems are essentially maps of the world. So they're maps that you use to orient yourself with, because we move from point to point, right? We're active creatures. And then those maps are very complexly structured. They're sort of hierarchically structured. And so, for example, you have some assumptions that are predicates of more of your actions than others. So, for example, here's a good way of thinking about it. Imagine that you're teaching your child to set the table, and they put the fork and the knife on the reverse sides of the plate. And you say, "You're a stupid kid. You've always been a stupid kid, and you're always going to be a stupid kid, and there's nothing that you can do to change that." Well, you might say, well, is the fact that the child made that small mistake an indication that he or she is that kind of stupid kid? And the answer to that is, well, it's some evidence. Now a sensible person would say, well, look, you got the knife and fork to the table, and you put it near the plate, so good for you, but you made this local mistake, this tiny local mistake. You just flipped these and you got it exactly right. Now, I think everybody who had any sense would realize that the second response is much more reasonable than the first. Now, the first response is one that knocks out the child's whole axiomatic system, right? You say, well, you're stupid, so you're bad. You've always been that way, so that covers your entire history. You can't learn, so you're destined for that in the future. It's like you've torn apart the orienting map that the child uses in the world. And it's a very important illustration, because if you have an argument with someone that you love, one of the appropriate tactics is to make the argument about the least that it has to be about, and to specify what you want as precisely as possible, because then you don't take the person apart. Now, there are times when we encounter pieces of information that threaten the integrity of our entire belief system. So another example would be, you have a relationship with someone, an intimate relationship, and it's predicated on the idea of fidelity. And so all of your memories of the relationship have that as an axiom for the representations. The way that you construe the present has that as an axiom, and the way that you construe the future has that as an axiom. And then you find out that the person has betrayed you, and perhaps multiple times. Well, your world falls apart. And the reason it falls apart is because that presupposition of fidelity is an axiom for every representation of that relationship you've made, and maybe of every representation of yourself you've made, and maybe of every representation of other people that you've made. And so it's a crucial card in the card house, right? You pull it out and everything falls. Okay, well, when people encounter information that is like that, they're likely to turn a blind eye to it. Well, and that often happens in the case of betrayal, because it's very rare. It happens sometimes. It's very rare that if someone in an intimate relationship betrays you, that you can't go back over the past and think, you know, there was a hint 2 years ago. There was another hint 18 months ago. We weren't holding hands as often, you know. He or she was always distracted. I knew, but I didn't ask any questions. It's willful blindness. Now, the ancient Egyptians, they represented the state as Osiris, and Osiris was willfully blind. That was one of the characteristics of the state, and it was because of that that his evil brother, Set, who's like a precursor to the idea of Satan, chopped him up and destroyed him. And so the lies that you're talking about are often sins of omission rather than sins of commission. It's like something threatens our axiomatic system at a very fundamental level. We get a physiological signal of threat. The physiological signal says, you should watch this and pay attention and unfold it and unpack it. And we think, no, we're not going there. And no wonder, because like, you want your whole house of cards to collapse and you fall into chaos. It's a terrible thing. So that's why we're motivated to lie to ourselves. But it's not helpful. And the more you do it, the more likely a precipitous collapse is to occur, because you're not updating your world models. And actually the neuropsychology of that's reasonably well understood. A guy named Ramachandran, for example, has done some good work on that, and Alcone and Goldberg as well. And but that's why, you know, it's very useful to know that our axiomatic systems orient us in the world and regulate our emotions. And so if you destabilize someone's fundamental axioms, you dysregulate their negative emotion. That's also why people fight so hard to protect not only their belief systems, but their social systems. So there's plenty of motivation to falsify, but it's a bad idea. You live out the falsifications, and the world hits you. People are motivated to do the least amount of damage to their cognitive structures possible to correct prediction errors. And it's for the reason that I just described, which is that, you know, that the deeper the axiom that you have to adjust, the more you lose of the map that orients you in the world, and then the more emotional dysregulation you experience. And that's no joke, like, you know, because people think of emotions in some sense as just subjective feelings, but they're not just that. They're psychophysiological reactions. And when it's like if say you're in a rough part of a city and you lose your map. It's like, well, you're going to be worried. And the reason you're worried is because something bad might happen to you. And so what your body does is ramp up into a state of emergency preparedness. And an emergency preparedness is a bunch of bad things might happen, and so I better be ready for any and all of them. And so it's very, very, very physiologically demanding. And you can handle that for short periods of time, but if you're in a state like that and it's chronic, well, that's stress, and that hurts you. You know, it hurts your brain. It destroys brain tissue. It suppresses immunological function. It enhances insulin production. It increases the probability that you'll be obese, that you'll develop cancer, that you'll develop heart disease, that you'll age. It's really no joke. And so when something axiomatically impossible happens, people are going to scramble to find reasons that don't require a retooling of their worldview. And it's no wonder, because they're avoiding, in archetypal terms, they're avoiding an involuntary descent to the underworld and even to hell. You know, like, for example, let's say that you're betrayed by your partner. You don't want to admit it. Well, no wonder, because all your memories of the past are wrong. Your view of your partner is incorrect, and so maybe your view of human beings and yourself is incorrect. And your future is like, well, hey, it isn't what you thought it was going to be. So God only knows what it is. But then, you know, when you dig into that, you might also find that there are reasons your partner was not faithful. Maybe you're a real son of a bitch, and you deserved everything you got. And so when you dig down and you have to restructure those axioms, not only do you have to encounter the unknown as such, which is no joke, but you may also have to discover your own malevolence. Well, it's no wonder people turn away from that. You know, like a worldview adjustment is a major revolution, and and you may not recover from it. That's the other thing. You know, if you're broken, and you can be broken by betrayal, there's no reason to assume that you're going to pop out at the other end of that sadder but wiser. It just might do you in. It might kill you, or maybe you're chronically depressed, or maybe you're resentful and hostile and murderous. Or there's no reason to assume that you will recover. So it's no wonder people are afraid to do that. It's not surprising at all, and everyone is like that. So you struggle to find the least amount of repair you have to do to keep your pragmatic prediction system intact. Well, and often that means accusing someone else, because then they have to change and not you. And it means exaggerating one fact at the cost of another as you scramble to maintain your ground.